At a recent gathering of world leaders in Paris, the French President Emmanuel Macron talked about nationalism, saying that it was the exact opposite of patriotism. Many assumed he was speaking indirectly to Donald Trump and to Vladimir Putin. However, patriotism is something that Putin lays claim to. He describes it as a central tenet of today's Russia, and then relies on nationalistic rhetoric to boost morale and shore up his political base. And not just on the television airwaves, on the silver screen as well. While Russia's been criticized over its annexation of Crimea in 2014, alleged election meddling in the US and spy poisoning in the UK, the cinematic treatment of the contemporary Russia story is somewhat different. Crimea, for instance, is the stuff of rom-coms. Russia's history on the battlefield and in the world of sports is a heroic and triumphant tale. The Kremlin not only backs those films to the tune of millions of rubles, it clamps down on filmmakers it calls anti-state and bans their work. The Listening Post's Leili Faroudi now on the cinematic effort to produce patriotism in Russia.
Грандиозный проект и грандиозный успех. Открыта автомобильная часть моста через Керченский пролив.
May 2018, Russian broadcasters struck a triumphant tone in their reports on the completion of the bridge connecting Russia to Crimea, the Ukrainian region annexed by Russia.
Еще сильнее, а всех нас еще ближе друг к другу.
And earlier this month, viewers were treated to the same message on a bigger screen.
Welcome to the Krimski Bridge.
The biggest bridge in Russia.
Это патриотическая комедия о том, что мы все.
Crimean Bridge is a patriotic comedy, propaganda camouflaged as a light love story, with the idea that the nation can do anything. It speaks of the great construction project of new times, because a great country must have great construction projects.
В стране должны быть великие стройки.
Krimski Most, or Crimean Bridge, was written by Margarita Simonyan. As editor-in-chief of state-funded news network RT, Simonyan is one of Russia's most influential journalists, a surprising but ideal candidate to author such a patriotic blockbuster. It's one in a long line released in Russia over the last few years, and it had strong support from the country's top politicians.
Тема Крымского моста – это тема, которая касается всей страны.
It's clear that Crimea is a subject of national interest, with the Kremlin apparently contributing at least $1.5 million to the romcom's budget. But this film and the 2017 release of Crimea, or Krim, bombed at the box office.
I think that it's not looking good in terms of box office success for such Crimea-themed films. The state productions about sport are much more successful. But the filmmakers are not interested in the historical facts. Let's take the film Legend 17. The whole plot is about the Soviet victory against the Canadian hockey team. Russia did win that first match, but Canada went on to win the series.
7-3. Это победа, товарищи.
Now that Russia is not always portrayed well abroad, and there's kind of some political adversity between Russia and other countries, society demands some kind of motivation to keep going. And sports and success in sports is one of those aspects where people can really watch a film and get a very positive feeling that, yes, I can do it.
Hollywood productions celebrate the might of the American military. And as Russian cinemas are dominated by Hollywood, I think there is a kind of a feeling among the government officials that there needs to be a response to that, not only militarily, in terms of, kind of making new tanks, but also from the point of view of filmmaking, that we should come up with a story that also celebrates the Russian army.
Теперь он знает, как русские любят свою родину.
Crimea and sports are reoccurring themes, but the main vehicle for restoring national pride in Putin's Russia is World War II, what they called the Great Patriotic War. When the Soviet Union fell, an official communist ideology was replaced with nothing. Grappling with this void, Vladimir Putin has made patriotism his watchword.
У нас нет никакой и не может быть никакой другой объединяющей идеи, кроме патриотизма.
The war creates a common heritage for a geographically vast and culturally diverse country, evoking memories of Russia as a great power and defeater of fascism, a narrative that brushes over some inconvenient history, like the non-aggression pact that Stalin pragmatically made with Hitler in 1939, or the ethnic cleansing carried out within the USSR. Under Russia's current Minister of Culture, Vladimir Medinsky, himself the director of the Military Historical Society, that national ideal is being adapted for film. In 2015, the government issued a state decree encouraging the use of patriotic cinema in education. And in February this year, the Ministry of Defense announced its own initiative to produce films that are heroic and patriotic.
I think Russia has been trying to find itself after obviously transitioning from the fall of the Soviet Union into a new country. It's been trying to find its own identity again. And the push for patriotic movies and for kind of a Russian identity is all part of that.
Patriotism is always called for in difficult times, for any country. There's a need to both distract and unite people. The theme of patriotism was displayed constantly in Soviet films. The struggle against the counter-revolutionaries, enemies of the people, as well as the depiction of grand socialist construction projects. We don't like to dwell on our mistakes and failures. We concentrate on victories. This principle of making such state-supported films is being resurrected.
Lenin supposedly called cinemas and circuses the most important arts for attracting the masses. From the early days of the Soviet Union, films needed to be socialist, high quality, and display Soviet superiority. The Politburo both supported and censored artists, and the innovations of Soviet filmmakers, names like Eisenstein, Ziga-Vertov, and Tarkovsky, became known and celebrated the world over. These days, films no longer hold the media monopoly they once did, but that hasn't stopped the Kremlin from taking an interest in shaping the country's cinematic output. And what Russians are calling kinoskandali, cinema scandals, have grown all too common.
Козёл, у тебя никогда никаких прав не было!
The 2014 Russian film Leviathan won both a Golden Globe and an Oscar nomination. At home, the film was criticised for painting an overly negative picture of Russia. Eventually, a version dubbed with less explicit language was allowed to screen. One that failed to get past the censors was a British film, Armando Iannucci's 2017 satire, The Death of Stalin.
Our General Secretary is lying in a puddle of indignity.
Medinsky, who didn't make himself available for an interview with us, called the film an insulting mockery of the entire Soviet past, and it never made it into Russian theatres. This year, just as the Russian film Leta was being released around the world, its director Kirill Serebrennikov was under house arrest and then on trial for fraud charges his supporters are calling a crackdown on the arts. And a few months ago, the Ministry of Culture was granted unprecedented control over the direction of Russia's film fund. Even indie film festivals have become a target. Vitaly Mansky's Art Doc Fest was hit by a new licensing reform, forcing both him and his festival to relocate to Latvia.
The Russian state has subjugated all media outlets, the press, the main TV channels, and even the single liberal cable channel Dozhd, which now has a very limited audience. Medinsky took up this tendency and has started to cleanse the whole cultural landscape, destroying everything that allowed the production of alternative content. And naturally, his attention fell on film festivals.
I think recently the government has kind of tried to use scandal and controversy as a tool on all levels, in terms of domestic policy, in terms of forming public opinion, but also kind of internationally. They've actually managed to use even negative representations to their benefit. So basically, as long as they can remain in that spotlight and they can appear to be powerful and impactful, I think they're quite happy with that.
Patriotism is politically useful as a concept because it is malleable. It can change shape to suit purpose. And if these blockbusters are anything to go by, the meaning of patriotism for Russia right now is winning.